Hello everyone, welcome to the video classes. So in our endeavor towards developing the e-content for the undergraduate students, the topic that we are going to discuss today is the administrative relations between the union and states. And this topic, it is covered under the fourth semester of BA Political Science. Well, in previous class, we discussed about the legislative relations between union and states. So while discussing about the legislative relations between union and states, we also discussed about the federal form of government. So why? Because we can understand about the union and state relations in India only when we have a comprehensive understanding about the federal system of government. So coming to the meaning of a federal form of government. So it is that form of government wherein there will be both central governments and the state governments. The powers are divided between the center and the states, and both are independent within their own spheres. This is called as federal form of government. Now, if we have to take a classic example for federal form of government, we can say America is the best example for federal form of government. And this system of government we also find in countries like Australia, Canada, Switzerland, and even in India we have adopted a federal form of government. So though this federal form of government is adopted in different countries in the world, the way the federal form of government is adopted will not be the same in all the countries. We find the different variants of federations in different countries in the world. So now coming to India. Now when India got independence and the framers of Indian Constitution, they were framing the Indian Constitution. So in the beginning, the framers of Indian Constitution, they were in favor of adopting a loose federation for India, just as something that we see in America. But later what has happened was because of a few experiences like the lessons that we have learned out of partition. So independence of the country has resulted in the partition of the country into two sovereign nations. So, and the second thing is keeping in mind the vast territory of the country, and also we find so much of ethnic diversity in India. So for that reason, the framers of Indian Constitution, they thought to have a strong center in India instead of having a loose federation. So that's the reason why in Indian Constitution we find both the features of the federal form of government and also the features of the unitary form of government. So Indian Constitution, we can say it's a beautiful blend of the federal features and also the unitary features. And here we can really acknowledge and we can appreciate the meticulous planning of the framers of Indian Constitution. So why? Because even till today, even after 70 years of independence, the Indian Federation is intact. So for that reason, all the credit we have to give the far-sightedness of the framers of the Indian Constitution. So the federal system that we have adopted in India, we have copied this from Canadian model. So in the beginning, though the framers of the Constitution, they wanted to have a system of the loose federation that we find in America. Later, the framers of Indian Constitution, they have shifted their opinion to have a bias towards the central government in India. So that's the reason why K.C. Ware, he says Indian Federation is, it's a quasi-federal state. And here, that's the reason why the framers of Indian Constitution, so they did not use the word federation in any part of the Constitution, and instead of the word federation, another substitute word that is used in the Indian Constitution is the Union of States. So the very first article of Indian Constitution, it says Bharat, India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. Now coming to the basics of the union and state relations in India, it is part 11 of the Indian Constitution that explains about the center and state relations. So to understand the center and state relations in India, we can divide the relationships into three heads, like the legislative relations, administrative relations, and the financial relationships. So legislative relations between the union and states, they are explained between article number 245 to 255. And administrative relations, they are explained between article number 256 to 263. And financial relationships are explained between article number 264 to 293. Now coming to the topic of discussion for today, that is administrative relationships. So we study the administrative relationships between union and states in the following heads. Number one is the jurisdiction of the center and the states. The second one is the directives by the union to the state governments under normal circumstances. And the third one is the directions of the union government during emergency. And the fourth one is the role of All India services. And the fifth one is we'll study about interstate council. And the sixth one is the interstate river water disputes. So under these heads, today we are going to discuss about the administrative relations between union and states. Now coming to the administrative relationship between the union and states. So first of all, we'll discuss the first point, that is the jurisdiction of both the central and the state governments. So administrative relationships, it's nothing but basically the executive relationship between union and the states. So we know when we take these two organs of government, that is legislature and the executive, it is the legislature which will formulate the laws and executive will implement the laws. Now one more very important function of the executive is besides implementing the laws. So the total administration of the country will be maintained by the executive. So here we find coming to the executive relationship between the union and states. So for executive relationships or the legislative relationships, the starting point is the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So the 7th schedule of Indian Constitution has divided the legislative powers between the union and states into three lists. The union list, state list, and also the concurrent list. And we know over the items of the union list, it is the parliament which can make the laws, and the state governments, they can make laws, they can formulate the laws over the items of the state list. And over the items of the concurrent list, it is both the central government and also the state governments which can make the laws. But here we find a predominant position which is given to the center over the items of the concurrent list. And those items which are not included in any of the three lists, they will be considered as the residuary items. And over these residuary items, it is the parliament which can formulate the laws. Now coming to the administrative part, coming to the administration. So what is the jurisdiction of the central government and what is the jurisdiction of the state government is? So over the items which the parliament has the authority to formulate the laws, or the parliament has the power to legislate, so over all those items, the central government has the power to maintain the administration. It means the parliament is having the power to formulate the laws over all the items of the union list. So it means the central government has the power to maintain the administration over all the subject matters which are included in the union list. And the state governments can formulate the laws over the items of the state list. So over all the items of the state list, it is the state governments which can run the administration. So in this manner, the administrative relationships are divided between the center and the states. Now coming to the central government, can pass, or else the parliament can make the laws over the items of the union list. At the same time, what the executive can do is, the executive also can pass the executive orders over the items of the union list. Like for instance, if we take defense, or else if we take atomic energy or railways, they all come under the union list. So for that reason, it is the central government which has the authority to pass the executive orders over the items which are included in the union list. So like for instance, if we take one order that is passed by the executive, like one rank and one pension. This is the executive order which is passed by the central government. So one rank and one pension, this is something that is related to the armed forces, and armed forces is a subject matter that comes under the union list. And also, if we can take one more instance, like one order passed by the central government, like instant triple talaq is made as the penal offence. So here, overall the items which are enumerated in the union list, the central government has the authority to pass the executive orders, and on the other side, the state governments, they have the authority to pass the executive orders over the items which are enumerated in the state list. So this way we can say, we can divide the jurisdiction between the central government and also the state governments. So in this way, the jurisdiction of administration between the central government and the state governments is divided in this way. That is, the central government can run administration over all the items which are enumerated in the union list, and state governments can maintain administration over the items which are given in the state list. But in India, because we have adopted a federal form of government, and to bring about a uniformity in administration throughout the country, and also to see that the federation will be strong. So for that reason, sometimes the union government may give the directions to the state governments, and the directions which are given by the union governments, they have to be followed by the state governments. So under normal circumstances, the directions which are given by the union government to the state governments will be different, and when there is an emergency, then the directions which are given by the union government to the state governments will be different. So first of all, coming to the normal circumstances. So under normal circumstances, in what way the central government will give the directives to the state governments is, if we take article number 256. So article number 256, what it says is, the executive power of every state shall be so exercised as to ensure compliance with the laws made by the parliament. So the executive power of the state always has to be in compliance with the laws which are made by the parliament. That is, the executive authority of the state has to be in accordance with the executive authority of the central government. Now coming to what is the meaning of compliance. Compliance is nothing but, it is an act of obeying an order or else a rule or a regulation. So the administration, the executive power of the state should not be contrary to the laws which are made by the parliament. So in this regard, whatever the directions which are given by the state, by the central governments, the state governments have to follow those directions. So the executive authority of the state always has to be in compliance or else in accordance with the executive authority of the central government, or it has to be according to the laws which are made by the Indian Parliament. Like for instance, recently the Union government has come out with the new education policy on 29th of July 2020. So when the Union Parliament has come out with a new law, new education policy, it is for the state governments to frame or else to formulate their executive in accordance with the laws which are made by the Parliament. So according to this particular policy, the new education policy, now there is a paradigm shift, there is a complete shift in the education system of India, wherein hitherto we used to follow a system of 10 plus 2, but according to the new policy, now we have 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 system. And this system is built up corresponding to the age group. Like for instance, the children between age group of 3 to 8 years, so the system of education that is provided, this is called as the foundational stage, and from 8 years to 11 years of age it is called as preparatory stage, and from 11 to 14 years of age it is called as middle stage, and from 14 to 18 it is called as the secondary stage. And not only that, one more very important change which is brought about in the new education policy is up to a child attains, he comes up to 5th standard or 5th class, so he has to be taught in his own mother tongue. So this is the new education policy that the Union government has formulated recently. So the state executives, they have to modify their executive authority in compliance to the laws which are made by the Parliament. And not only that, sometimes what happens is the central government will give the directions to the state governments. Like the same article, what it says is, the executive power of the union shall extend to giving of such directions to a state as may appear to the government of India to be necessary for that purpose. So for instance, the union government can give directions to the state pertaining to the construction and maintaining of means of communication declared to be of national or military importance, protection of railways within the state, or the provision of adequate facilities for instructions in mother tongue at the primary stage of education to a child belonging to linguistic minority groups. So in this manner, we can say that the central government can give the directives to the state governments. So it is up to the state governments to follow the directions which are given by the central government. Like for instance, if we take the few subject matters like the military, the communication that is related to military, atomic energy, or railways, or telecommunication, or post and telegraph, all these items they come under the union list. Directions, whichever are given by the union government, the state governments they are obliged to obey the directions given by the central government. Like for instance, if we take the nuclear energy, the nuclear energy is the subject matter of the union list. So in this regard, if the central government has made a law to establish a nuclear power plant or something like that, and the central government makes a law stating that nearly around 500 acres of land around the nuclear power plant, there shall not be any type of constructions or any type of activity in that particular area. So now the central government can formulate this law. Why? Because the nuclear energy, it comes under the union list. But now here the state governments, they cannot say that agriculture is something that comes under the state list. So for that reason, the central government wants to make a law regarding this agriculture, and they come out with a decision saying that we will cultivate the land, or else we will establish something in that particular area from 50 kilometers distance to the nuclear power plant. So this the state governments cannot do, even though agriculture is something that comes under the state list. So why? Because article number 256, what it says is, the directives which are given by the union governments, they have to be obliged by the state governments. And if we take the recent example, after the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, when the state central government has taken a decision of the complete lockdown. Here there were the 3 phases of lockdown. When the central government has taken this decision, it was for up to all the state governments. It was to the state governments to definitely follow the orders which are issued by the central government. And even if we take the policy like demonetization, when demonetization was declared by the central government, so it was up to the state government. It was imperative, it was compulsory for the state governments to follow the direction which is given by the central government. So in this manner, under normal circumstances, the directions which are given by the union government, they have to be followed by the state governments. Now article number 257, what it says is, the executive power of the state should not impede or prejudice the executive power of the union. So here, what is the meaning of impede is to obstruct. So what it means to say is, so here when the state government is formulating its executive decisions, so the executive decisions or executive policies of the state government should not be in such a way that so they hinder or else they obstruct the executive orders of the central government. Like for instance, if we take the recent policy formulated by the central government, like the new education policy. Now the state governments should not come out with their own education policies which are contrary or which are opposite to the policies which are made by the central government. So the executive authority of the state government should be in such a way that it should be in compliance to that of the executive authority of the union, or it should be in compliance to the laws which are made by the parliament, and the executive power of the state should not impede or should not obstruct the executive authority of the union. And now coming to article number 258, what it says is, the parliament is also entitled to use the state machinery for the enforcement of union laws and confer powers and entrust duties to the state. So here what the central government can do is it can use the state machinery in maintenance and protection of the properties belonging to the central government. Like for instance, if we take the Indian Railways. So the Indian Railways is the biggest organization which is maintained by the central government, and Indian Railways is one of the subject matters of the union list. So for that reason, regarding the maintenance of Indian Railways or protection of the property of Indian Railways, so the central government can use the machinery of the state governments. And now coming to the items of concurrent list. So here we have seen that over the items of the union list, it is the central government which can formulate the laws, and it's the central government which can run the administration, and the state governments can run the administration over the items which are enumerated in the state list. And now coming to the items which are there in the concurrent list, under normal circumstances, it is the state governments which will be having the executive powers over the items which are enumerated in the concurrent list, except when a constitutional provision or parliamentary law is made conferring the central government to maintain the administration over the items of the concurrent list. So it means that under normal circumstances, over the items of this concurrent list, the state governments can run the administration, but when a constitutional provision or when there is a law which is made by the parliament, then it is the central government which will maintain the administration over that particular item of the concurrent list. And now here, this was the administrative relations between union and state during normal circumstances. But when there is an emergency, then what type of administrative relationship that exists between union and states, here we are going to see. We know the Indian constitution has conferred three emergency powers to the President of India. So one is the national emergency, that emergency imposed because of war or internal disturbances or armed rebellion according to article number 352. And the second one is the president's rule, or the emergency imposed because of the failure of the constitution. This is according to article number 356. And the third one is the financial emergency according to article number 360. So when an emergency situation arises, then regarding administration, what type of relationship that exists between the central government and the state governments. Now, for instance, when a national emergency is imposed in India, according to article number 352. So when a national emergency is imposed, then what happens is, we know India from a federal state, it completely transforms into a unitary state, wherein all the powers will come into the hands of the central governments. So during this time, what the center can do is, now the center is entitled to give the executive directions to the state governments on every matter. It's not that under normal circumstances, the central government can give directions only over the subject matters which are listed in the union list. But when there is an emergency, then the central government, it will get the power to give the directions over all the subject matters to the state governments. Now during emergency, you see, it is not always necessary that the state governments have to be suspended. So sometimes the state governments are suspended, and sometimes the state governments are allowed to continue. So when during national emergency, when the state governments are not suspended and the state governments are continuing, during this time what happens is, the state governments will not be having any powers which are conferred by the constitution. Why? Because now all the powers, they come into the hands of the central government, and whatever the directions which are issued by the central government, they have to be followed by the state governments. And now coming to the president's rule, which is imposed in a state or in couple of states according to article 356, when there is a constitutional breakdown in a state, then what happens is, here when a president's rule is imposed, then what happens is, the state government will be suspended, the state legislature will be suspended, and the president can assume to himself the functions of the state government, and the president himself, either he can pass the directions, or he can use his subordinates, or he can run the administration of the state with the help of the governor of that particular state. So when national emergency is imposed, this point we have to remember, when national emergency is imposed, then what is happening is, the central government is giving the directions to the state governments. But when state emergency is imposed, what happens is, because here the state government is completely suspended, then what happens is, the president completely assumes the powers over the state governments, and he will maintain the administration of the state on his own, or the administration is maintained through the governor. And now coming to the financial emergency explained in article number 360. Of course, financial emergency was never imposed in India, but if at all the financial emergency is imposed, then what happens is, the central government will give the directions to the state governments regarding the financial matters. Like it could be regarding the budget, or it could be regarding the salaries of reduction of the salaries of government employees, and also the judges of the high courts. So regarding all these financial matters, the central government has the authority to give the directions to the state governments. So this is about the administrative relations between center and states during normal circumstances and during emergency. So now here we had a brief understanding about the division of the administrative powers between the union and states, and also the administration, the administrative relations between union and states under normal circumstances and during emergency. But here again, if we take the legislative relations and also coming to administrative relations, we find though the powers are divided between the union and states, we find there is a bias towards the central government. That is, the constitution, it intends to establish a strong center in India. Now this can be proved by many institutions that we see in India, like the institution of the governor, or else the All India services, or having a single constitution for India, and also the integrated, the single and integrated judicial system. So by all this we can say there is a bias towards the central government in India. Now coming particularly to this aspect of the All India services. So besides the central and the state services, the constitution under article number 312, it provides for the creation of the All India services, which are common to the both center and the states. So though these offices belonging to the All India services, they will be working in the states under the state governments. Their recruitment, training, promotion, disciplinary matters, they are all decided by the central government. So for that reason, though these officers of the All India services, they will be working in the states under the state governments. So most of the time they will be accountable and they are responsible to the central government. Why? Because they are recruited by the central government, and even their promotion and the disciplinary action also comes under the purview of the central government. Now regarding the institution of these All India services, though there is a debate, that is the All India services, they are helping the predominance of the center over the states, but still these All India services are playing very important role in bringing about the uniformity of administration throughout the country. So this is because of this, not only because of the All India services, because of the constitutional provisions which were adopted in framing the federal structure of India. So because of all this, we can say even till today the federal structure of India is intact. So the All India services have been playing a very important role in bringing about the uniformity in administration in India. Now here there is also a provision for the constitution of the Joint Public Service Commission for 2 or more states. That is, when 2 or more states, they come together and they pass a law in their own state legislatures, requesting the Indian Parliament to constitute a joint public service commission for these particular states. Then here the Parliament will take up this issue, and the Parliament will formulate a law creating a joint public service commission for 2 or more states. And now we also have to discuss about one apparatus or one institution which is created to bring about the cooperation and effective consultations between the central government and state governments, and to see that the conflicts between the central government and the state governments are addressed or resolved through dialogues or discussions or consensus. So for this reason, an institution is created by the Indian Constitution, and that is the Interstate Council. So it is according to article number 263, the constitution empowers the president to constitute the interstate council. So accordingly, in the year 1990, the interstate council was established, and primarily some of the important decisions or discussions in the interstate council were like the time-bound clearance of bills referred to the president's consideration by the state governments, and the second one is approve the alternative scheme of devolution of share in central taxes to the states. That is regarding the distribution of the revenue that is procured by the taxes. So the distribution between the central government and the state governments also, it was the discussions were held in the interstate council. And the third one is regarding the indiscriminate and indiscreet use of article 356 in the country. This is regarding the imposition of president's rule in the states. Now, regarding the administrative relations between the union and states, there is one more important point that we have to discuss is that is the interstate river water disputes. So this problem has arisen especially after the states in India were reorganized in the year 1956 on the linguistic basis. So when the states were reorganized in India, then what happened was the conflicts have arisen between the states over the use of river waters, and those rivers that flow through a couple of states in India. So regarding this, what the constitution it says is, the constitution it empowers the central governments to adjudicate whenever there is when there is an issue of river waters between one state and another state. So for this reason, article number 262, what it says is, the parliament by law provide for the adjudication of any dispute or complaint with respect to the use, distribution or control of the water. Like for instance, here we can take a couple of examples like the Kaveri river dispute. So we always hear about this in the news, the dispute between Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. So Kaveri river, it flows through Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Puducherry. But there is always there is a conflict going on between Tamil Nadu and Karnataka over the use of Kaveri waters. And even if we take the Krishna river waters or Godavari river waters, here we find the disputes between one state and another state. Like Krishna river, it flows through Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka and Telangana, and coming to Godavari, it flows through Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Telangana and Orissa. So regarding these river water disputes, many times we find there is the clash of interests between the Telangana government and also the Andhra Pradesh governments. So anytime there is a conflict between one state and another state over the river water disputes, it is up to the central government to adjudicate and to address to this particular issue. In this manner also, the state governments are made to depend upon the central governments. And one more thing, in what way we can say the state governments have to depend upon the central government is, those states which are on the border, all the time they have to depend upon the central government for their protection from the external aggression. So this is explained in article number 355. So article 355, what it says is, this article imposes duties on the center to protect every state against external aggression and internal disturbances. So in this aspect also, that is even regarding external aggression and war, the states, they have to depend upon the central government. So now this is about the administrative relations between the central government and the state governments. So here what we have understood is coming to the jurisdiction of central government and the state governments. The central governments will maintain administration over all those items which are enumerated in the union list, and the state governments will run administration over the items which are there in the state list. And the second one is, now whatever the directions which are given by the central governments, they have to be obliged by the state governments. And one more thing is, the very important thing regarding the administrative relationships is the executive authority of the state always it has to be in compliance with the executive authority of the central government. And the second thing is, the executive power of the state governments should not impede or they should not obstruct the executive authority of the union government. So by this here what we find is, what we can understand about Indian Federation is, though the legislative relations and administrative relations, legislative powers and the administrative powers are divided between the union and the states, here we find a strong bias towards the center. So this is done to see that in India we have a strong central government because this is one thing which can keep the Indian Federation intact. So this was the main the opinion of the opinion of the framers of the Indian Constitution. And also we have seen there are many provisions within the Indian Constitution that have made the central government more strong, and that have made the state governments to depend upon the central government. Like if you take the institution of All India Services or the institution of the governor, or else the states depending upon the central government for the sake of defense. So through all these mechanisms or apparatus, we can say that though the administrative powers are divided between the center and states, there is a bias towards the central government. So this is about the administrative relations between union and states, and in next class we are going to discuss about the financial relations between the union and states.